G'day mate, 40 here. So it was striking how rehearsed and how canned Kamala Harris's comments were at last night's presidential debate with Donald Trump. And it was striking how unrehearsed and unprepared Donald Trump was and how he just tried to improvise. And it's really hard to improvise under great pressure. And it's even harder to improvise when you're on the defensive. So it's easiest to improvise when you feel safe, when you feel in command, when you have a safe place to go to. So some combination of preparation, both with ideas and with words, but also with your physiological state, so that you're free of unnecessary tension and compression. And then from that place of safety and freedom, then one can improvise. But Donald Trump was debating 3 against 1, right? The two moderators, Kamala Harris against Donald Trump. And it's very hard to improvise from that perspective. Also, it's striking to me how easily Donald Trump gets triggered into speaking in ways that are obviously against his best interests. I do a live stream almost every day, and I almost never get triggered into saying things against my best interest. It just virtually never happens because I'm 58 years of age. I know who I am. I have a reasonable understanding of my gifts and of my weaknesses. I appreciate my mixed record in life. And so because I'm not living in a world of delusion, I don't experience mortification. All right, I get knocked back at times. Right, I've lost a job, I lost a client. But I remember one job I lost, I was just kicking ass. Right, I was turning in great work. And I was let go for reasons that had absolutely nothing to do with the quality of my work. Right, simply that they had Googled me. And it's like, oh, we don't want this. And so that was temporarily humiliating, but it wasn't mortifying. And even in the process, right, as soon as I saw that I was being let go, fairly quickly I was able to free myself and maintain excellent relations with the two people who were conducting the process. And they both felt bad about it. They both didn't agree with the decision. And I was at ease because I knew, and they knew, what great work I'd turned in. And this was nothing that I needed to feel embarrassed or mortified about. So as long as you're living in reality, you don't have to be embarrassed and humiliated. And the way that Donald Trump just keeps getting triggered to speak, defending his crowd sizes and defending his behavior on January 6th, and to just keep playing the defensive, and the way Kamala Harris was able to get under his skin. But when you're at ease with yourself, it's really hard for people to get under your skin, right? If you don't have pretensions, right? If you're not living in a world of delusion and make-believe, if you accept the reality of your strengths and weaknesses, it's really hard for people to trigger you. And I'm just surprised that Donald Trump doesn't have more clarity. So if you make a criticism, 40, you're illiterate, right? That does nothing to me. 40, you're a bumbling fool around women. You don't know how to read their signals, right? Again, that's not convincing to me, because when I ask a woman out, about 75% of the time, I gauge the situation accurately, right? If you're consistently asking women out and they're knocking you back, right, you've misjudged the situation, right? women will give you signals whether or not they want to go out with you. And you have to be willfully blind to their signals to get that kind of humiliation. And it's sad that Donald Trump at age 78 is just so easily baited and is not particularly in touch with reality, so that he just gets triggered and goes on these mortifying rants that don't do his own case any good. And we see with Kamala what we expected: highly trained, rehearsed performance, right? She's running like Bill Clinton's second term, right, with an incredibly vacuous agenda. She kept talking in the debate last night about how I've got a plan, but I can't think was the last presidential candidate who ran on such a vacuous, empty policy platform as Kamala Harris. So she was overly rehearsed. She didn't answer the questions. It's sad, though, as John Podhoretz noted, that Donald Trump is just not capable of prosecuting a case against her. Right? He's not capable, apparently, of staying on script and making an argument. He just continually invokes the word they, but it's never clear whose they is. Is it the Taliban? Is it House Democrats? Is it the mainstream media? Right? He can't seemingly string together coherent paragraphs. Right? You'll get one or two coherent sentences, and then off track he goes. Now, there was a reaction online that I suspect is profound, that while the elites are alarmingly convinced that Kamala Harris strongly won the debate, undecided voters are not at all convinced by that. Right? Undecided voters are still very much undecided. I can't imagine many voters making up their minds on the basis of that debate last night. Which association is more career limiting? They're both really limiting. They're both so intensely limiting. I'm not sure. Shabbat Shalom. I'm not sure which one is more limiting. Porn or white nationalism. We need someone to crack down on this brazen pussy eating in certain communities. Is Donald Trump the man? Is this Pico Robertson? No, this is Westwood, bro. We're not in Pico Robertson anymore. We're a couple of blocks away from UCLA. So the other thing I was thinking about, we got results on the Harvard class of 2028 following the Supreme Court ruling, which states that public universities cannot admit people on the basis of race. And the new Harvard results show a decrease in the number of black students from something like 18% to 14%, and an increase in the number of Latino students from 2% to 16%. And it makes me think of certain knee-jerk reactions on the right that are just inherently black-pilled. So when the US Supreme Court ruled that public universities could not decide admissions on the basis of race, a whole bunch of people on the right, including Nathan Kofner, said, well, universities will just cheat. This ruling will mean very little. And I noticed this knee-jerk black pill tendency in many parts of the right, that no matter what happens, this means nothing, right? There's a Supreme Court ruling or some kind of development that is good for the right, and there's widespread reaction on the right that this means nothing. That the powers that be, the institutions, will just find ways around this Supreme Court ruling. As opposed to, my perspective is that it will make some difference. I remember when Donald Trump was running in 2015, 2016, and then was elected, there's this widespread black pill tendency on the right that, he'll never he'll never be able to make any real change. He'll never be able to make a difference. And I remember that back in the time of Ronald Reagan, when Ronald Reagan was elected. Then it felt like the major issue was containing the Soviet Union and containing social welfare spending. And there were all these right-wing commentators talking about how Reagan was unable to contain social welfare spending, unable to contain the rise of the Soviet Union. Well, Reagan helped coordinate the crushing of the Soviet Union. And there was a 1% decline in the percentage of federal government spending on a GNP basis, which is huge. Like to go from 19 to 18, that almost never happens. There was a significant reduction in the size of the federal government under Reagan, even including the massive military increase in expenditure. And so there's something about being on the right and being conservative that resonates with the idea that we are doomed and that nothing matters. And I think it's maladaptive, unhelpful, insane, and out of touch with reality, because there was a significant reduction in federal government spending under Ronald Reagan. There was particularly a significant reduction in social welfare spending under Reagan. And there was a significant reduction in immigration, in illegal immigration, and in refugee intake under Donald Trump, so much so that by 2020, for the first time in decades, with the help of COVID restrictions, Donald Trump had essentially stopped immigration to the United States. He just absolutely crushed it. And yet, there's this just widespread black pill tendency on the right. It's never going to make any difference, man. Right? The university is just going to cheat. They're just going to get around the rules somehow. So I was just reading an article in Haaretz about how Jews in Tulsa, Oklahoma have it pretty good, that everyone's friendly. There was one Jewish comment that support for Israel in the United States is a mile wide and an inch deep. Well, Jews should be incredibly grateful for that, because there's no inherent self-interested reason why the United States should be particularly interested in Israel. So you should be grateful that support's a mile wide, even if it's an inch deep. And then there was the one kippah-wearing professor at a university in Tulsa, political science professor, who talked about people making wrong judgments with regard to Jewish identity. And as an example of that, he mentioned one person who wished him a Shabbat Shalom on a Tuesday. So, yeah, technically, you say Shabbat Shalom only from Thursdays on, but it's not an error to say it any other time. Right? It's a friendly gesture, right? To interpret a non-Jew wishing you Shabbat Shalom on a Tuesday or a Wednesday as some kind of mistake on their part is just an insanely negative framing. So some people just don't want to take wins, man. So UCLA is coming back in a couple of weeks. Classes start at the end of September. So UCLA is gearing up for a whole bunch more pro-Palestine, anti-Israel protests. So this is the Veterans Affairs building. And there were a few months in 1994 where I lived out of my car, and I made the mistake of parking here one night overnight. There was a knock on the window, and some private security guy said, "You can't park here, man." So a state judge just ruled that the Veterans Administration here by UCLA has to build a bunch more low-income housing for homeless veterans. My God, life in Westwood is pretty sweet, all right? Very little trash, safe streets. So Westwood used to be the nightlife capital of Los Angeles in the mid-'80s. And then one evening in 1987, there was a gang shootout and one innocent civilian got killed. And overnight, the nightlife scene just shut down in Westwood. and moved to West Hollywood, Sunset Boulevard, the Roxy. Yeah, support is support, bro. Now, UCLA is on a quarter system. What about the claim that Reagan signed a major amnesty for illegal aliens? He did. He did sign a major amnesty for illegal aliens, and then it was supposed to go with increased borders enforcement, which never happened. Oh, so attitudes to whether or not the moderators were fair entirely depends upon your hero system, right? So almost universally on the right, there is outrage that the moderators were unfair. Also, some outrage in the center, as embodied by Mark Halperin, former political director for ABC News. But overwhelmingly, liberals and many centrists and people on the left say, if you're complaining about the refs, that just means you're losing. Which is true, right? If you are complaining about the refs, that means you are losing. I don't see why Donald Trump would not do a second debate. He has always done better in a second or third debate than he has in his first debate. And it's shocking how unprepared he was for this debate. And it's shocking that Laura Loomer was on his debate prep team. And Donald Trump always reshuffles his campaign team. But if he moves away from Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita running his campaign, I think that's a major mistake. And he's still in a very good position to win the Electoral College and the presidency. So there was one time where I heard a spontaneous roar of laughter from outside during the debate. And that was when Donald Trump started talking about the immigrants eating people's pets. So it may be factually dubious, but it's a visceral moment that is just hugely entertaining. Overall, not an entertaining debate. Right, a pretty grim debate. where exactly was the joy from Kamala Harris? Well, she did look much happier. So I was looking at the debate with the sound off because I was simultaneously live streaming. And the visuals did favor Kamala Harris, right? She did look happier than Donald Trump. So I suppose there are some things there to hold on to for Democrats and their Joy Vibes campaign. I gotta think Donald Trump wants a second debate, and Kamala Harris has already offered one. So after his humiliation this time, I hope that Donald Trump might take his debate prep more seriously. So it sounds like Donald Trump managed to stay in control for about the first 10-15 minutes, while in the Biden debate, June 27th, he managed to stay in control for the first 40 minutes. So 40 minutes seems to be his limit. It only lasted about 10 minutes before Kamala Harris got under his skin. Yeah, is Donald Trump simply too old to absorb new information? Yeah, classes starting earlier. So in a semester system, they'd start earlier, but in a quarter system, they start in late September. Thank you. Yeah, support is for people on their deathbed. Yeah, I don't vibrate. I don't have empathy. I don't share the sentiment of particularly guys who are looking for support, particularly sponsees and potential sponsees. I make it very clear I'm not here to give you support. So on rare occasions, I'll encourage a sponsee to text me every day. but then I'll say, don't expect me to respond or reply. And then sponsees will often say, well, can you at least, acknowledge that you read my message? Can you at least say thank you or something to let me know that you read my message? And I said, bro, look at your phone. It will show you that your message has been read or not. Right? I don't need to do anything to indicate to you that I've read your message. So stand on your own 2 feet. And if you're doing this, right, if you're asking me for support on something where you're perfectly capable of seeing the same information yourself, right, just looking at the message on your phone that I've seen and read your message, and yet you're asking me for additional support on top of that, you're doing that all over your life. Right? You do these things in one area of your life, all over your life, you're asking people to do things for you that you are perfectly capable of doing for yourself. And with few exceptions, I will not put up with that from anyone in my life. Right? Anyone in my life asking me the things that they're perfectly capable of figuring out for themselves, it's just a friendship killer for me. Right? It's a real mark of an immature person, particularly a man. So women will often ask for support as a means of bonding and connecting. But for a man to do it when he's perfectly capable of figuring things out for himself, it's really weak. Yeah, just Google it, bro. Absolutely. Just Google it. And life is often going to be 3 against 1. Right? Life is often going to be like the situation Donald Trump was in last night. And if that's the reality, you just bounce with it. And you should know yourself. Know what you're capable of. You should recognize that things aren't always going to be fair. And there are 2 things that come from being triggered. So I often do get triggered on my show in the sense that I get more energy and more passion and more strength and more excitement, and neurons start firing, and I develop the desire to mount a more coherent and persuasive argument. My God, I'm trying to do a live stream, and we're allowing all these immigrants into our country who are doing this maintenance work that is destroying the audio quality of my highly intellectual live streams. We gotta stop immigration until we figure out what the hell is going on with these loud interruptions to my live streams. So you can get triggered in a good way, right? You can hear someone call you a fatso and, okay, I gotta change my life, I gotta lose weight, I need to exercise more, I need to change my dietary habits. You can get triggered and realize I need to get more sleep, I need to leave my CPAP mask on. So I was having some lower back instability that comes with sleeping on an elevated, on an edge, a pillow edge. So I've got one that's, I think, 3 inches or 4 inches, and another one that's 8 inches, and sleeping on an elevated wedge. All right, I often wake up with some lower back instability, so it's not really great for my lower back. On the other hand, it does open up my nasal passages when I'm sleeping on a wedge, and so with the pillow, right, my head may be elevated, 12 inches above my waist, but too much of that, and it does some unpleasant things to my lower back. So if I leave my CPAP on, I don't need to sleep on a wedge. But often I just get incredibly annoyed with my CPAP and take it off. But thank God, last few weeks I've come to terms with my CPAP. So I have my CPAP running all night. I've got increased air supply flowing through my CPAP. If I don't use the CPAP, all right, I'll often have mild to moderate sleep apnea, and then I'll wake up in the morning with a headache, and I hate that. right? I hate waking up in the morning with a headache, with a sleep apnea headache, because then it lasts all day. It doesn't go away. But then yesterday, something really weird happened. I had my CPAP on, but I had a moderate headache at 1 a.m., even though I'd had my CPAP on for 4 hours. And I just got annoyed with it. And so I said, oh man, if I've already got a headache with my CPAP on, I'm just going to take my CPAP off. Woke up at 5:30 without having used a CPAP for the past 4.5 hours. Now I've just got a killer headache. And that's rare. Normally the sleep apnea headache is moderate. It's not disabling. But yesterday morning I woke up with a disabling headache. I tried to get started with my day, but after an hour I gave up and I just lay there, not listening to anything. After about an hour of just lying there, I was able to very gingerly get on with my day and the headache slowly went away. But that was really weird to wake up with a disabling headache. Oh, LA can smell nice at certain times of the year. LA smells nice almost all the time. Really great light in LA and great smells. Leaf blow me. I was reading this woman online, and she talked in her blog about seeing for the first time a white guy with a leaf blower, and I knew I had to date her. She's probably the hottest woman I ever dated. She was like an 8. She was the first woman I've ever dated who my friends were consistently hitting on and trying to seduce. Sometimes you're just a cat among the Haitians. How much do I usually tip my Uber driver? 10%. But if I need him to like open up the boot, what do you call the rear of the car in America? Like if he has to go to extra effort, let's say takes him 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, and I'll tip him $5. Or if I form a relationship with him, which sometimes happens, then I'll tip 20%. I'm not a huge tipper because I'm a conservative and I believe in concentric circles of loyalty. So my primary loyalty is to myself, and then to my family, my closest friends, my community, my extended family, then people that I participate in 12-step programs and my other pursuits. And so all of those loyalties are much higher to me than service workers who I don't know. Oh, the trunk. Yeah. Yeah, neediness is hard to take. Yeah, some people just need constant reassurance, like particularly people who are molested. So I have a friend, when he orders in Uber Eats or the equivalent, he just has them drop it off at the door. So he never has to confront them and never has to tip them. But yeah, people who are molested as kids, they are often exhausting, because I wrote a lot of stories about rabbinic sex abuse. And rabbis were sexually abusing those overwhelmingly who are vulnerable, right? They weren't sexually abusing, upstanding people who had their lives together and were very strong, definitive, categorical, self-sufficient, right? They would prey on those who are vulnerable. And so those would be the people from whom I would seek stories about rabbinic sex abuse, and they were exhausting to deal with. Right? Everyone on the sex abuse beat just gets beaten down by the neediness and the prickliness and the volatility of the people reporting on their abuse. They are the most volatile, will turn on you in a second. Oh, God, so tiring to deal with. only 28% of Uber users tip at all. Yeah, if you're depending on tips to get by, right, you've made some bad decisions. So we've had an explosion of tipping since COVID, and those people in service positions who are depending on tips, you've made some bad choices in life. And the tipping is enabling you to carry on with usually maladaptive behavior. And so I'm not a big proponent of tipping, not opposed to it either, but I look at concentric circles of loyalty. You have obligations primarily to yourself, to your family, to your friends, your community, that are far more important than your obligations to strangers in service work. And if you're in a service job and you depend on tips to pay your bills, you've made some really bad choices in life. And you need to make better choices. And stop expecting the kindness of strangers to subsidize your bad choices in life. So this morning I listened to the Claremont Review of Books / American Thinker podcast on the debate. So on the right, admitting that Kamala won, but not in impressive fashion. I listened to Mark Halperin and his two shows, noting that Kamala won, but also noting what a biased job the moderators did. I notice quite a lot of discontent on the left that Kamala is not running on specific policies and that she's running on a vacuous campaign reminiscent of Bill Clinton's second term. So every day I probably spend about an hour on Apple News Plus. Right, I scroll through The Atlantic, The New Yorker, and there's a great article on transcendent morality versus understanding morality from an evolutionary perspective that I want to discuss. So every day I spent about an hour in total with Apple News Plus, meaning reading Politico. I check Politico several times a day, Axios several times a day, New Yorker once a day, Haaretz once a day, National Review once a day. How many realistic options do those below a certain level of IQ have? Good question. So I was not talking about people who do not have the option to do better. So you really need to belong to a community, right? Particularly if you are average or below average in IQ. First of all, because you'll make poor judgments on your own. Right? The lower your IQ, the more you need other people to guide your decision making and to just model good behavior for you, provide some support and connection. So particularly during tough times, man, it really helps to have a community, or if you're having kids, right? New parents just get overwhelmed by having kids. But my primary understanding of community comes from within Orthodox Judaism. I mean, there are just so many parts of life where I don't know, and I'll go to shul, and at Kiddush, I'll talk to people I know and get some guidance. But the worst thing about being poor is that, generally speaking, only poor people will hang out with you. Now, in Orthodox Judaism, there's a certain egalitarianism, but you're not likely to develop close friendships with people who earn exponentially more money than you. So one strong reason not to be poor and to put a priority on making money is that your social life will be severely limited as long as you are poor. And I think Jews have it right. They put probably more emphasis on making money than any other group of which I'm aware. And I think that's entirely appropriate for the realities of life. If it's not the number one priority, particularly if you're a man, it should be pretty much tied or close to it. And so I love and respect the realistic nature of Jewish life and of Judaism, the way it deals with the natural passions and its recognition that earning a good living is vital for your own welfare and that of your family and for that of the community. So I consistently find, I don't know, 1 in 20 articles in the New Yorker well worth